What's up, guys? My name's Raf, and welcome to Impacted Ministries, a channel for transparency and spiritual growth. So let me not waste your time. The verse of the day is Proverbs 16, verse 32, and it says, "Better to be patient than powerful, better to have self-control than to conquer a city." This will be the start of a new series on lust. So with this in mind, let's first define lust. Lust, by definition, is an intense desire or craving for something considered pleasurable or desirable. If we add this into the verse, we get, "Better to be patient than powerful with an intense desire for something pleasurable. Better to have self-control of an intense desire for something pleasurable than to conquer a city." So my first question is, why is patience better than power? Let's first define patience to understand why. Patience, by definition, is the ability to wait for something without becoming annoyed and to endure difficult or unpleasant situations without losing our temper or complaining. So if we substitute this definition into the verse, we learn it's better to wait for something without being annoyed, and it's better to endure difficult, unpleasant situations without complaining, rather than being powerful with an intense desire for something pleasurable. So let's establish some strategies for overcoming lust. First, we are encouraged to wait. Like and comment if you like waiting for anything, because I'm one of those people who don't like waiting. But wait, by definition, means to stay where one is or delay action until a particular time or event. So here's two things we can learn here. First, to stay in the places that keeps us absent from lust. And secondly, we have to delay actions until a particular time. So let's use sexual lust and apply it to these points. I can personally attest to the fact that my bed was a hotspot for sexual lust in terms of masturbation. So I realized that once I woke up, I need to avoid just aimlessly laying on my bed, as this will allow lustful thoughts to be planted in my mind. So I will go gym, practice instruments, go in the kitchen, go for a walk, do anything that would prevent me going into that danger zone of my bed. As if we're honest, we should always have a purpose for getting in our bed. It's either rest or relaxing our body. So if we notice ourselves in bed without a purpose for being there, be aware that lust will try and creep its way into our minds. The second point about delaying is another big one. So for me as a virgin, I know I have to delay the sexual urges until marriage. But that's not enough. I need to delay the music I listen to, as if the music I'm listening to is about making love and winding up and sexual experiences, and the content I'm watching is about explicit girls getting on bad and winding up and shaking yash. Those seeds will be planted in my mind and begin to cultivate a desire for what I'm hearing and seeing, which will then lead to the expression of that desire through masturbation or sex. I want us to notice a cycle here. First, we listen or we watch a sexual piece of content. That's exposure. Secondly, that content plants a seed in our mind. That's it being embedded. Thirdly, that seed cultivates a desire, aka lust, which is the establishment. And finally, that lust is expressed. That's the execution. I say all of this to say that if we're struggling with lust, whether it be sexual or any other type, it starts with what we are feeding our mind. Our heart diet has to change. We need to stop getting annoyed about the fact we keep messing up, or that we have to wait for the right time to execute our sexual desires, and start getting annoyed about what music we're listening to, what content we're watching, what corrupt counsel we are seeking, what social media trends we're living by, because once we begin to detox our minds and our hearts of these influences, we will realize how much stronger we will feel, how much more disciplined we are, how much self-control we truly have to overcome lust. The next thing we learn is it's better to endure difficult, unpleasant situations without complaining. But what does endure mean? Endure by definition means, in short, to hold out against. But you may ask, how do I hold out against lust in the heat of the moment? We must have a game plan. As they say,
fail to prepare is preparing to fail.
This is the reason a lot of us find ourselves in cycles of lust. Conviction or guilt is not a game plan. They just inform us of what we shouldn't do. So how can we establish a strong game plan? First, we must do an honest self-reflection to identify what our goals are. In this case, overcoming lust. Then we must identify why. So in this case, it could be peace of mind. Secondly, we must identify how will we achieve this goal. We must identify what the threats are going to be to the goal. So a threat could be masturbation. We must identify what leads up to the threat. So for example, could be listening to sexual music or IG models on our explore page. And then we need to identify how to eliminate the lead up to the threat. So that could be substituting sexual music, especially when we're on our beds, and doing a detox of our Instagram page by clicking not interested. Thirdly, we need to execute that game plan. And fourth, we need to review the game plan and make amendments until we have an action plan that works. Fifth, and finally, we need to remember to be patient, as lustful seeds would have already been planted in our minds, so it will take time to be uprooted. So my question to you is, why is being powerful with a lustful desire dangerous? Let's look at a story to identify why. So for context, David is the king of Israel, a man after God's own heart, and a respected leader. One evening, while his army is at war, he remains in Jerusalem. David sees Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah, bathing. He sends messengers to bring her to him, and he sleeps with her, even though she is married. She becomes pregnant. To cover it up, David calls Uriah home from battle, hoping he will sleep with his wife and think the child is his. Uriah refuses. David then orders Uriah to be placed at the front lines, ensuring his death. After Uriah's death, David takes Bathsheba as his wife. So why does this story make power and lust so dangerous? Here are 4 reasons. Firstly, it's the abuse of power. David as king had the authority to summon anyone. Bathsheba had little or no ability to refuse him. His position enabled him to exploit his power for personal pleasure, blurring the lines of consent and right action. Lust unchecked by conscience becomes entitlement. Secondly, loss of moral clarity. David's desire blinds him. Despite knowing she was married, he acts impulsively. Lust narrows a person's focus, pushing aside values, relationships, and even God's law. Power makes sin easier to commit and harder to resist. Thirdly, collateral damage. David's actions led to Uriah's death, Bathsheba's suffering, the child's death as a divine consequence, and long-term strife in David's family, including rebellion, betrayal, and more bloodshed. The powerful person's sin didn't just affect them, it rippled across to families, armies, and a nation. Finally, spiritual corruption. David tried to hide his sin by manipulating others and lying. His soul darkened under the weight of deception, to only be brought to repentance when confronted by the prophet Nathan. The lesson we can take away is being powerful with a lustful desire is dangerous because it allows for unchecked appetite to override conscience, especially when there are no external limits and internal discipline is lacking. In David's case, his fall teaches us that even the greatest leaders are vulnerable when desires replace devotion. The greater the power, the more dangerous the lust. Second part, seeking validation as guys from saying we smash all these girls, it highlights an insecurity in our identity. This is why girls struggle with rejection and being held accountable. Now, girls are not a flex. Better to have self-control than to brag about how sweet and freaky you are.